Hello and welcome to 2019. New year, new name. We are now going from Professor Speaks to Pro Pharma Talks. And along with the new name change, we're also going to be changing our platform. We're also going from YouTube to YouTube and also podcast. We're going to be distributing our podcast through all the different podcast apps that you guys like to hear from. So, getting into that being said, our topic for today's episode will be what to look forward to in 2019, other than just our name change and platform change. We're also going to be talking about several healthcare topics like uncertainty in the marketplace and drug prices and several other topics. But before we get into this episode, I'd like to remind you to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications, and also, now that we have a podcast, leave a review. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to a new edition of Pro Pharma Talks. My name is Alex Hernandez. Alongside me as always is Dr. Craig Stern. And looking forward to 2019, we're going to be discussing several healthcare topics. And we want to bring more clarity to some of the questions that you might have in regards to healthcare. So, Dr. Stern, you want to show us what to expect this year?
Sure. Let me try and put it in perspective. The very first thing we want to talk about is uncertainty.
Right.
What's going on to stabilize the healthcare market? Clearly, there have been issues where insurance companies were not going to get paid for the low-income people that they were serving.
Yeah, you're talking more about the Affordable Care Act. What's the
Affordable Care Act? Yeah. Issues with regard to healthcare, commercial, Medicare, Medicaid.
Right.
All of this is a result of uncertainty. The whole issue here is when people don't know what to do and they don't know what's going to happen, then their answer is either do nothing, which people did after 2008 when we had the major recession.
Right.
And then others have said, well, I've sat around, I've done nothing. Now we're going to try it, or we're going to try experiments. Some of these experiments are very expensive. They're consolidation of companies, insurance companies and pharmacies. Some of them are truly experiments, and they'll last for several years to see if they work or not and whether investors will agree with that. And others of them are relatively simple in trying to deal with how do you deal with making issues more efficient so that the uncertainty is less of an impact on your business.
And some of that uncertainty will also be affected by the government shutdown right now as well, right?
They will certainly be affected because people aren't being paid. So as a result of that, there's kind of a trickle-down effect of what's going on where people are around in order to give care. People are around in order to try and provide whatever sustenance or wellness kind of programs, other kind of programs. If it's in commercial, it probably doesn't matter, but if it's in the VA and Medicare and Medicaid, certainly it's going to matter in what goes on, and there is a trickle down. The other part of it is the Affordable Care Act. With the changes in Congress, it appears as if the Affordable Care Act will have a new life. And those will see that those that were trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, those kind of arguments will go away. And now it'll be a matter of how do you salvage whatever the Affordable Care Act seemed to have done. There's certainly data to demonstrate that it was effective in quality of care, recruiting people for care, etc. But we still have about 14% of people in the United States who do not have health care insurance. So the fundamental issue is what to do about that.
Right. So, and we'll delve more into that in future episodes. But what else is on the what else should we expect this year?
The other issue is a major move from volume to value.
Right.
And that's fundamentally the issue of I'm not going to pay you for the amount of work you do, whether it's the number of prescriptions you fill or the number of patients you see. I'm going to do it based on the fact of whether someone got some value. is their blood pressure in control? Is their diabetes in control? Is their asthma in control? What is going on? That value is becoming significantly more important, and it is a major focus to try and decrease the cost of healthcare by moving away from paying for everything that you do to ensuring the fact that whatever was done led to a positive impact for the patient.
Right. Providing incentives for better care, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and that's also part of the ACA as well, right? So
It is.
We did talk about that.
It is.
So we'll talk about that in the future as well. What else should we expect?
The third issue is consolidation. What we saw in the past year in 2017, 2018 was that companies were buying other companies or they were consolidating because in an age of uncertainty, if you don't know what to do, you try and bulk up so that you have more than one revenue stream in order to try and deal with the problem. So you saw health plans and pharmacy chains consolidating. You saw issues with regard to drug wholesalers and pharmacies consolidating. You see a lot of physician groups, probably over 80% of all physicians in the United States now work for a corporation, whether it's a hospital corporation or a larger healthcare corporation.
Right.
They're doing that. That kind of consolidation presumably is going to level out in 2019. We won't see as much because some of the bigger ones presumably occurred in 2017, definitely in 2018. And so now the issue is these companies need to take time. They need to get together. They need to do the management that's necessary to make them work. And so the expectation is that that process will leaven out. It's definitely not going away.
Right.
It's now moving from we did the deal, now let's make the deal work.
Yeah, the reason why that's an interesting topic is because it's not something that's necessarily new. It just spiked over the last couple of years, and it had to deal with some of that uncertainty you were talking about.
Although some of the vertical integration of insurance companies and pharmacies or insurance companies, and pharmacy benefit managers wasn't expected and wasn't seen. So there have been new models, but once again, it was a factor of things are uncertain. How do we go about controlling a bigger share of the healthcare cost than just dealing with our particular silo?
Interesting. So moving on, what else should we expect?
Well, we should certainly expect this whole issue of retail or retailization of healthcare delivery, where clinics are spouting up in pharmacies. We have urgent care clinics, etc., things outside of the hospital that are more directed to ambulatory care, people that are walking around who have acute healthcare needs. And those healthcare needs then can be handled. If you need your blood pressure check, you can go into a clinic. They can check your blood pressure, take a look at the meds you're on, make adjustments, or otherwise, similarly for diabetes or thyroid disease or whatever. But same kind of issue. More and more of it being retail, where you're not going to a doctor, potentially sitting there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, dealing with it in a retail setting, at the same time potentially getting your prescriptions at the same location. And if there are some simple checks to be done, those can be done as well. So there's more of this kind of taking healthcare and spreading it out in a general effort to prevent. I mean, we've talked about prevention, but the general issue is check people, make sure they're well, keep them well so that they don't get worse.
Yeah, that's usually our main recommendation for every episode is, at the end of it, how can we prevent most of these issues? And how can we prevent person going to pharmacies, excuse me, to keep from getting prescription pills all the time, and just overall well-being? How can you prevent some of these cases that are preventable?
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So and also moving along, we want to also we want to know what to expect as far as drug prices in 2019 as well.
Sure.
Because that's a huge issue for most of Americans, at least.
It's a huge issue
Yeah.
for most of Americans, and by the way, it's also becoming a huge issue outside the United States as well.
Right.
Even though they control drug prices, it's becoming an issue. So major issues we need to think about is this whole issue of transparency. Everybody's talking about drug price transparency.
Right.
The general question is, what does that mean? First issue is, what is the cost going to be? How much is it going to cost?
Right.
If I know how much it's going to cost, then I ask the question, is there a cheaper option? Are there other places I could go, a cheaper pharmacy? Or are there other medications, brand, generic, or otherwise that I can use? Bottom line is transparency right now means tell me how much it's going to cost so that then I can decide whether I want to pay for that, whether I'm going to look for other options.
Right. So, and also with drug price transparency, you want to know why is the drug being priced so high, don't you? I mean,
well, you want to know, but when you're standing there at the prescription, you can argue why is it being priced so high, but you probably can't do anything about it.
That's true.
Whether it has to deal with, the argument today is whether it had to deal with manufacturers, whether it had to deal with pharmacy benefit managers, whether it had to do with health plans, whoever. The bottom line question is, it still costs me. How am I going to do it? Because the fundamental issue is the cost and the affordability. It may identify a cost, but it may not be affordable. So when I'm dealing with that, the question is how am I going to find either pay for it or what other options do I have to lower the cost?
Right. Okay, so moving on, what else can we know about drug pricing this year?
Well, the second issue has to deal with drug price versus value. So as we talked about, moving from, they're not going to pay everybody from the number of prescriptions they fill or the number of patients they see. They want to know whether there was a value. So the fundamental issue is moving in contracts with manufacturers, contracts with pharmacy benefit managers, contracts with health plans. The bottom line issue that everybody is asking is, we'll pay a certain amount based on the fact that people get better for whatever reason.
Right.
But if they're not getting better, then either we're not going to pay at all, or we're not going to pay the prices that you're asking, because there's no value if my blood pressure didn't go down, my diabetes wasn't improved, my thyroid function wasn't stabilized, my asthma wasn't stabilized. If none of those happen, then the bottom line issue here is why would we pay?
It makes sense because if you pay a such and such amount for a drug, it's got to work, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if the drug is $2 versus $200. I mean, you want to pay for it and you want it to work.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Moving on, what's the next topic?
Well, specialty drugs are a big focus. It's the same issue of drug cost to value, but in specialty, where you're dealing with branded drug costs that are somewhere in the range of $150 a month, or generics at somewhere around $20, $22 a month.
Right.
Now you're dealing with specialty drugs that cost $84,000, $100,000, in some cases $500,000. So the question here is, if you're going to spend this kind of money, how do you ensure the fact that someone is actually getting better? So it isn't just for if you will, the standard drugs that people have gotten for a long time,
Right.
but also about these very expensive drugs with a major emphasis on we're not going to pay at all if the drug doesn't work. And secondly, if it does work, is it in fact a major impact or not? Meaning, did it decrease symptoms for a day? Is it worth that money for a day?
Cost?
Or is it worth it for a week, a month, a year, whatever,
Right.
in order to deal with it? That's going to be a major emphasis.
Right, and the sad part is a lot of these really expensive specialty drug costs are life-saving, potentially.
Depending on what they are. There
Right.
are drugs for orphan diseases, which are very rare, and these may be the first therapies there have ever been to treat these conditions. That's remarkable.
Right.
Absolutely remarkable. There may be where they're trying to replace current therapy with one of these new drugs. Then it's an issue of, does it cost $1 or does it cost $10? And now the question is, if it's going to cost $10, I should get added value to what I got when I paid $1, or why am I paying $10 when I could have paid $1?
Wow, interesting. And we'll delve more into that topic later on. Also, well, let's go to the next topic. What's the next topic?
Very last topic here is international pricing. The question here is benchmarking price.
Okay.
People are talking about transparency. People are talking about value. And now the question has been brought up. Medicare is talking about it. Medicare Part B is talking about it. Certainly, the president and others have brought this up, and that is, why don't we find out how much the drug is being sold for in another country outside the United States?
Okay.
Use that as a benchmark and ask, why are we paying X amount more for that? So it's a difference between an international benchmark price and a U.S. price, where the argument has always been the United States needs that money in order to innovate for new drugs. And the argument today is, okay, that may be an argument,
Right.
but there's also drug innovation going on in China, India, Brazil, South Africa, etc. And so the question then is that really an innovation price, or is it that other people are making it too? That's the argument, and that's what's going to go on.
Well, so it's going to be U.S. comparing themselves to other countries?
Yes.
I mean, it's...
Yes. And that's complicated.
Yeah, it's very
because
complicated.
Other countries put controls on the price. They say, okay, we're going to include this drug. We're going to have it on our formulary for all the people in the country, but we're only going to pay X number of dollars for it.
Right.
And now you're going to compare it to the United States, where there are no controls.
Which is even more interesting, because then you got United States, you're talking about controls. You're also talking about, we're very business oriented. There's a lot of, like, we set the market price for based on businesses. Businesses will say, we made such and such, so we're going to sell it for such and such to be able to profit off of it. And profit is a huge reason why a lot of people do business in this country.
That's right.
In other countries, it's not necessarily that issue, because most of the drug companies out there are not necessarily profit based, right?
Well, they are all profit based.
All of them.
But they are, yes, absolutely.
All of them. Are we sure all of them?
But yes, but the question is, how much profit?
Okay.
And how much profit are they going to make? And is it this kind of U.S. innovation model where we pay more so that we can get more new drugs, and that money goes to new drugs?
Well, yeah, but I was getting to the way politics are handed down, because there's a lot of government oversight here, and there's not that much government oversight here, and so there's differences in how they're approaching the drug market.
Well, without doubt, there are different regulations in different countries about how things are done, without question.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, the United States has made a major move, both in Congress. I think the president has talked about it, certainly in healthcare, etc. Everybody is making a major move and asking the question, how do you lower the cost of drugs? How do you lower the cost of healthcare so that effectively people can afford what's going on, and it's not going to break the bank just because someone gets sick?
Right, and people can afford it, and also the U.S. can keep innovating.
Yes.
It's a very, very interesting topic, and we'll delve into that in future episodes as well. So, just to close it out, what are some of the things our viewers and listeners should remember?
Well, I think there's 3 points. One is, uncertainty is not the solution, because it leads to new experiments and people trying new things. So uncertainty stimulates it stimulates people thinking about it, but just having uncertainty in the healthcare market is no better than uncertainty in financial markets, no better than uncertainty in political markets or otherwise. You need to understand that people are going to be looking at a bunch of different options, some of which will work, some of which won't.
Right.
That's issue 1.
Okay.
Issue 2 is value is the new mantra. So when we talk about cost, the argument is moving from it costs X to what do I get for it? If I spend $1, how much value do I get for it? That's the second. And the third issue is that lowering the cost of drugs is a major objective. Everybody wants to lower the cost of drugs.
Right.
And The concern, of course, is people can't afford it, but the other concern is that it'll swallow up a bigger portion of the healthcare dollar, and as a result of that, without any controls, the healthcare dollar begins to expand more and more and takes up a bigger part of the economy, and then you push out other areas that you need with regard to family and social and education and economics and other stuff.
Right, and it's very good things to remember. Just to recap and go over exactly what Dr. Stern said, he's like, 3 things to remember. Number 1, uncertainty is not a solution. Number 2, value is the new mantra. We want quality, right? We want
That's
quality.
right.
Value is the new mantra. And number 3, lowering the cost of drugs is the major objective for everyone, right?
Yes.
Everyone. So we'd like to thank you again for joining us this year on Pro Pharma Talks. And we'd like to remind you to hit like, subscribe, hit the little bell for notifications, and also go to propharmaconsultants.com where you can find a lot of articles written by Dr. Stern himself and free education for everyone to enjoy and learn from the professor, Dr. Craig Stern. See, his head is swelling already. So thank you very much for joining us. Remember, hit like, subscribe, and hit the little bell for notifications. That's it for our episode for today. But before you go, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about us. Us, as in we are Pro Pharma Pharmaceutical Consultants Incorporated. We are a women-owned consulting firm that specializes in healthcare consulting, analytics, pharmacy benefits, and organizational strategy for healthcare systems. This week's featured product is Pro Pharma's Clinical Compliance, digital and clinical edits for monitoring medication effectiveness and risk. Our analyses provide clarity and help to prioritize high-risk problems, providing hundreds of clinical edits and medication compliance and adherence results. For more information, visit propharmaconsultants.com or give us a call at 888-701-5438.